The Marine moves slower than the others. Not because he's wounded, not because he's tired, but because of what he's carrying. The canisters on his back slosh with every step. Thick liquid fuel, heavy and unstable. A hose runs over his shoulder, the nozzle clenched tight in his hands. Everyone around him knows what that silhouette means. Enemy soldiers spot him first. Friendly Marines instinctively spread out, giving him distance. He is not just another rifleman. He is a priority target. If he goes down, he doesn't just die. He burns. And on the islands of the Pacific, that fear followed flamethrower operators everywhere they went. By the time the United States Marine Corps pushed deeper into the Pacific, the character of the war had fundamentally changed. Japanese forces no longer defended territory through visible front lines. Instead, they disappeared into the terrain. Caves, bunkers, and tunnel systems were carved deep into volcanic rock, reinforced with timber and steel, and designed to survive days of bombardment. Naval gunfire shattered the surface. Airstrikes flattened visible structures. And yet, when Marines advanced, fire erupted again from positions that should have been destroyed. Traditional infantry tactics failed repeatedly. Grenades thrown into cave mouths were often thrown back. Rifle fire ricocheted uselessly off stone walls. Even explosives collapsed entrances without killing the defenders inside. Every assault followed the same pattern. Marines advanced, suffered heavy casualties, and gained only limited ground. This created a tactical crisis. Commanders were not searching for innovation or elegance. They were searching for a method that worked consistently. Something that could end resistance without sacrificing entire squads for every bunker. The flamethrower answered that need by attacking something conventional weapons could not: the space the enemy occupied. Fire flowed, smoke displaced oxygen, heat turned shelter into a trap. The solution was effective, but it placed the cost squarely on the man who carried it. The flamethrower itself was not a new invention. Versions of it had existed since the First World War, mostly as experimental weapons with limited tactical value. Early American models were heavy, unreliable, and rarely integrated into standard infantry doctrine. The Pacific Theater changed everything. Island warfare exposed a widening gap between firepower and access. Japanese defensive doctrine emphasized endurance rather than dominance. Positions were built to absorb punishment, remain hidden, and reappear once infantry closed in. From a planning perspective, this created an impossible equation. More artillery meant more destruction, but not necessarily fewer defenders. More infantry assaults meant more casualties without guaranteeing success. The flamethrower offered a brutal form of efficiency. It reduced the need for repeated frontal attacks. It shortened engagements measured in lives rather than hours. It allowed Marines to neutralize positions that had resisted every other method. But unlike artillery or air power, the flamethrower demanded proximity. Its operator had to walk directly toward the strongest point of enemy defense. This concentrated risk in a way no other infantry weapon did. Commanders understood the trade-off. The loss of one operator could prevent the loss of dozens of riflemen. From an organizational perspective, the calculation was cold but logical. From the perspective of the man carrying the tanks, it was absolute. The weapon existed not because it was humane or sustainable, but because it solved a problem no one else could. And someone had to carry it. A flamethrower team usually consisted of 2 or 3 men. The operator carried the weapon itself. Fuel tanks on his back, ignition system, pressure valves. An assistant carried extra fuel and provided cover. A third Marine often acted as security. They moved together, slowly. The operator had to get close, sometimes within 20 yards, sometimes closer. To fire, he exposed himself. The burst of flame revealed his position instantly. Bright, unmistakable, impossible to miss. Japanese defenders learned quickly. Shoot the flamethrower first. Snipers watched for the tanks. Machine gun crews waited for the flame. Mortar teams adjusted fire as soon as it appeared. The weapon that gave the Marines an advantage also painted a target on one man's back. The fear was not abstract. It was practical. First, the weight. Second, mobility. Third, vulnerability. Fully loaded flamethrowers weighed more than 70 pounds. Moving uphill across ash or coral drained strength fast. Diving for cover was difficult, crawling was slow, and the tanks offered no protection. A bullet or fragment did not simply wound the operator. It turned the weapon into an execution. Japanese forces understood this. Captured documents and battlefield reports confirm that flamethrower operators were deliberately prioritized. They were not simply killed. They were meant to be destroyed in a way others would see. That visibility mattered. A burning operator sent a message faster than any warning ever could. Fear did not stay with the man carrying the weapon. It spread through the unit, watching him go forward. Fear spread faster than fire. Iwo Jima stripped away any remaining illusion about the role. The island was not defended, it was engineered. A dense network of tunnels connected firing positions across ridges and slopes. Japanese defenders could withdraw, reappear, and counterattack without ever exposing themselves above ground. Flamethrowers became essential and expendable. Operators were often killed within minutes of deployment. Replacement crews stepped forward knowing exactly what had happened to the men before them. In some units, survival time was measured in hours. What made Iwo Jima different was clarity. There was no belief left that skill alone could keep the operator alive. No expectation that experience or caution would change the outcome. Commanders understood the arithmetic. Risk one man to clear a position, or lose dozens attempting it without him. This calculation was repeated again and again, sometimes within minutes, as positions were taken and immediately replaced by new firing points. Each time, the answer was the same, and the burden fell on the next man in line. This marked a shift. The flamethrower was no longer seen as a specialty weapon. It became an assigned burden, a role filled not by volunteers, but by necessity. The fear surrounding the weapon stopped being personal. It became institutional. Everyone knew what the flamethrower achieved. Everyone also knew the price attached to it. That knowledge followed the Marines long after the island was secured. After the war, flamethrowers gradually disappeared from frontline infantry units, not because they were ineffective, but because their effectiveness depended on concentrating extreme risk onto one individual. Modern doctrine shifted toward standoff weapons and armored solutions. The flamethrower represented a boundary where necessity overruled protection and success depended on asking one man to absorb a risk no one else would. That is why it remains remembered with unease rather than pride. The flamethrower was never just a weapon, it was a burden. It worked by turning one Marine into a target and asking him to walk forward anyway. That is why Marines feared carrying it, and why some of them still remember the weight long after the war was over.